I thought all you Chapmans did was shoe. That's really is that the only
Man,
profession?
pretty. It's interesting you ask that because I've always wanted to do a little of everything. There you go. I've always wanted to do. When I grew up, I was always around the older guys, the cowboys. Like really, your dad really a lot too. When I was younger, once you get old enough to kind of get around, and so I just wanted to be a cowboy. So whatever it was that was cowboy, I wanted to do it. And so, my brothers, we just always had college people around all the time, and so yeah, that's pretty much what we're known for and what we've kind of done. But I've done a little of everything. From day work and break horses. I mean, weld, build fence. I've done it all just because it was stuff we always wanted to do. But oh yeah, so I brought Joe Rogan. Every time somebody comes to Joe Rogan, he always they always bring him something. Well,
Oh, you bring me something?
you're the Joe Rogan of our world, and so I built here. You can set it down. It's got a little deal. So I built you a little something.
Oh, dang! What is it?
So it's a ball made out of horseshoes. Which the horseshoes since I'm here today, I'm representing all the horseshoes in the world, man. So,
Yeah, you are.
so that's the horseshoes in the world, the big circle ball, and then of course the greatest bull rider of all time, Dale Brisby, is on top. And,
Yeah.
And so my father-in-law, he's a cowboy cartoonist and cowboy artist, and I had him draw the bull, and then I cut it out, and then he painted it for us. So
Dang,
So anyway,
that's fancy.
we brought that to you so you could set it out there so everybody know who the world's greatest bull rider really is.
You guys do need to find something to do with your old horseshoes, right?
Right.
So
Well, those are brand new, man.
I was about to say they don't look like they've been pulled off of a horse.
Well, and make sure that in case you need to shoe a horse someday, you can tear it apart and you'll have some shoes.
Dang, that's cool. We can put it here in the podcast studio.
And if you look at there's some significance on the bull there. Of course, you look at the bell, it's like somebody was born like July the 4th, 1977. There's a birthday right
Dang,
there.
how'd you know my birthday?
And that's the Liberty Bell, because hey,
every
every great bull rider, they have to have something significant on their bull rope. That's the Liberty Bell, man.
Dang,
it's actually for I'd say for Independence Day. So that's
heck yeah, I like that hat I'm wearing too. Got the
it's
shades.
An American hat.
That's an American hat.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that. Dang, I don't think I've gotten a gift in a long time, if ever, from a podcast guest.
Well, of course. I mean, that's why I said, man, we gotta take Dale something he'll remember us by.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I never know what to do with my old shoes. I always think that I'm going to do something with them. Those are all new, but
it can be a hassle. Old horseshoes, man. You get piles of them, pile up. And what we'll do is a lot of times I'll just put them in a box and box them up, and people come by. There's always people wanting to do horseshoe art, and so I'll sell them. $10, $20 a box, or whatever they are. So they can pile up pretty good. Some of my buddies that are really, really top notch horseshoers, they pile them up in a square, and they make a big tall pile of them. It's just a real square pile of horseshoes that looks pretty cool, but I don't really have anywhere to.
Do you not ever? I mean, can you not just reuse them?
Well, you can reset them, but they wear, obviously. So as they wear out,
How many times could you reset one shoe, you think?
Well, for me, I usually reset them. I'll usually reset them as long as they're still good, maybe twice, once or twice. But my brother Bryce, now he'll reset them until there's no shoe left. I mean, he's a pro at it. He likes saving money,
Yeah.
So he'll reset them to death as long as the nails still wear. He'll reset them to death. But a lot of people make art with them and stuff. I've never really been a big horseshoe art fan, but just because been around it all my life and you see all these horseshoes. But there are some people that they really make some cool stuff out of old horseshoes, and so we sell a lot of our old horseshoes to people for that. They come pick them up, and I sell them to my friends, and I give them to people I don't like, So. But that's what I tell people most of the time.
Dang, I was about to ask something very specific. Going back to the beginning, like when did you with your dad being the famous farrier he was. When did you first start shoeing?
You know, when you grow up around, it's kind of like rodeo. You know, when you grow up around it, you don't really, there's not really a starting date. You just evolve into it, you know. And it was kind of like that with us too. You know, there was, when I was younger, Dad shot horses, and you always want to do what your dad did. You know, whatever your dad did, man, that's what you want to do. A lot of us, and so especially when it's fun and cool, he always had somebody. Kind of as I got a little older, there was always somebody there to, you know, working for him, and I would always go help them. And we always. Then there was a time there that we had. What he became really known for was the Heart Bar shoe, which was a shoe that was real instrumental in developed into a shoe that was one of the first protocols to shoe founder and laminitic horses that actually worked. And he had studied the anatomy and physiology of the foot and how it all worked. And they did all kinds of crazy things trying to out of books that were written in the 1800s. You know, that's where he kind of found the shoe, and he revised it. And so there was always people around, and I was always into whatever it was with horses I wanted to do. And so they were always shoeing horses around our place. And so, you know, and when I got a little older, I had my own horse, you know, and I'm like, Dad, will you help me shoe my horse? He goes, no, I'll give you the tools and stuff, and I'll be back later to check on your work. You know, so you get in there and you get to playing around with it. And then the guys that were working for him would help me. And he always had us around people that were willing to help us. And so you just kind of evolve into it. And one day you're shoeing horses, you know, and he actually didn't start out to try to be a horseshoer. His dad was an engineer for Continental Oil Company, and he grew up in Wichita Falls and New Mexico, and they trapped and did all that kind of stuff. He's a trapper. He'd carry his 22. He was real tall, and he carried a 22 short barrel rifle down the pant leg into his school, and he'd stick it in his locker in school, and they'd go run muskrat traps and stuff down on the Wichita River after school. And
No kidding.
and then in the morning they portaged a canoe to school, and they'd take that canoe and chain it to the bicycle rack, and then they'd get on the Wichita River and they'd go check their traps in the morning. Then his dad was working at the 4.6s on some oil rigs and stuff, and he would take a little wagon with Cokes and candy bars and stuff and sell to the Roughnecks. And one day he saw the Cowboys out there riding, gathering cattle in the pasture, and he said, man, one of these days I want to come work on the 4.6s ranch. And so, you know, with that being said, you know, life goes on, and he goes to Texas Tech, and he ended up getting a job at the 4.6s in the summer and doing some work stuff. That was when Big and Bradley was there. He was one of the first Marlboro men, you know, and got him a brand new saddle, and he wanted to be a cowboy, and he showed Big in his saddle. He was real proud of it, you know. And the first thing Big did is take his brand new saddle and threw it in the water trough, you know, and to get the stirrup set and all that, and it just like broke his heart. But anyway, and then there was a guy there. Have you ever seen the picture of the Tom Ryan of the guy? He's in the pasture and he's standing there with his horse, and he's got a apple behind his back, and he's feeding the horse.
Yeah.
That was Sheep Morrow, and Sheep Morrow was one of the first guys that was instrumental in getting him introduced into horseshoeing. So he was going to college at Tech and breaking some horses, and he was one of the last guys to ride a horse to Texas Tech. Whenever he was going to school there, he'd break horses, and he'd ride them from West Carlisle into town and keep them at the ag building right there on campus at the time. And where he was out there working, there would be people say, man, I need to get my horse trimmed. And he's like, well, heck, I can do it. And the horseshoer wouldn't show up, or they'd be late, you know, kind of like I was this morning. And so he'd say, well, I can do it. So he started trimming horses, and they'd start bringing him shoes and nails, and he'd say, well, shoot, he'd charge them, you know, $7, $8. And he goes, heck, I can make money doing this and so that's kind of how it all kind of started. And then he went to the Tech Library, and he got a book out of the Tech Library that was written in the late 1800s, and scientific horseshoeing. And he started reading that book, and then he was working for a veterinarian there at Lubbock, and there wasn't really any horseshoers. There was one horseshoer there, and he was an older guy, and he went to him to ask him for help, and he said, you'll figure it out, son, if you ever want to do it. And so right then my dad said, you know, if I ever learn anything about shoeing horses, he said, I'm going to make sure that I don't hide it from anybody. I'm going to make sure people understand. And he said that, you know, so he always used the term, he said, knowledge is like a pile of horsemen there. If you leave it in one pile, it kills everything under it. But if you spread it all around, everything benefits. And so he swore that he'd always help somebody if he could. And so, you know, he started shoeing horses as a way to just make ends meet to pay for college and stuff, and it just ended up manifesting itself into a business. And then he got to the point where he was like, heck, why would I do anything else? And
But then whenever you wanted to learn, he turned around and he was like, well, figure it out and I'll come back and check on your work.
yeah, kind of. And then, you know, we used to go, he used to shoe horses out at the Lubbock feedlot and different places around, and they'd get in a truck and drive around to shoe horses. And I'd always go with the guys that worked for him. And I'd always, when I was big enough to clean out shoes, I'd just start cleaning out shoes, and then I'd get to pulling shoes when I got a little bit bigger. And then when I had my own pony, I'd trim my pony and they'd help me. And you just kind of, you know, I've always said you just kind of learn it through osmosis. You know, you just kind of, one day you wake up and you're doing it and you really don't know how you did it. And then he always put us in with the right people. You know, he always made sure that there were people in place that would show us the right path. And, you know, we lived in the country kind of, but we went to a city school. And so they'd always have Western Day or something. So everybody would come to our house for Western Day, and that was all cool, you know. And then they'd want to have some kind of something that people could do. So we'd get a horse and we'd demonstrate horseshoe, and we'd demonstrate roping the dummy, and everybody'd get a rope and they get to rope the dummy in the bale of hay. And so we'd pull up one of our old gentle horses, and I'd get one of my buddies from school, you know. So because I wanted to be cool, you know, you want to be the cool guy. So you find the coolest kid in school and say, okay, he doesn't like me, but I'll get him up here so he'll hold the horse for me. You know, now I'm cool. And so he'd hold the horse, and I would do the demonstration. I'd teach him how to trim the foot and show him how to trim the foot. And so that was a way that I guess Dad, in a way, got us kind of going and just put us in play where it just kind of became part of our life. And then we had a place at our stables at our place, and a lot of the college kids kept their horses there. And of course, my dad shod a lot of their horses, and then we were always around the college kids, and so that's kind of how it got started. And then whenever I was in high school, when I'd get home from school in the afternoon, I'd just go to the shop and I'd help them shoe horses. I'd pull shoes, finish, shape shoes, and then, you know, you get a little older and a little stronger, a little bigger, and then, you know, Dad, he's in there, go pull the shoes off that horse, and he's in there on the phone, you know. And did you get his feet trimmed? No, so I'll trim his feet. Did you get the shoe shaped? Yeah, I'll shape it. So the first thing you know, you're like, heck, I might as well do it. He's going to be in there on the phone. So that's kind of how it happened. And
so you kind of had a back for it before you even realized. I mean, like, first time you probably put on all four shoes on, actually finished a horse yourself, you were kind of legged up for it, so to speak.
Maybe, I remember, I've always thought back, because people ask me, how long have you been shooting a horse? And I always try to think back to the first time I ever shot a horse. And I had a little old paint pony, and I got out in the front yard one day, and I started shoeing him, and Dad had come out there, and he had to help me shape the shoes, I know, because I don't even remember, but I remember shoeing that horse, and it took me all day long, but I was determined. I was going to get him done, and just, I don't know why I had it in me to do that.
How old were you then?
Shoot, man, I was probably 11 or 12,
Yeah.
but I was man determined, And,
Dang, I've never even heard of that. Somebody putting shoes on a horse that young.
It just, I don't know. It's just crazy. You go think, and there's no telling what it looked like. And I can't remember if.
Well, also it's a paint pony, so it couldn't have been the most, it's ponies in and of themselves. And then the fact that it's a paint.
Oh yeah.
Probably like the most ornery little thing you could even pick to shoe for your first one.
Yeah. That's how you learn what kind of a, attitude you have. You're usually really mad and ready to kill somebody at the end of the day if you're working on a paint pony, especially if it was a mare, but it wasn't a mare.
I bet you never jobbed him in the ribs with the rasp either.
No, but you know what? I tell you what, Boots O'Neill, so he always talking about hitting a horse with a rasp. Boots, he's funny, he comes and tells me a story. He goes, one time, every time he brings his horse up to get shod now, at the ranch, he'll pull him up there, and first thing, how'd your family, how'd the kiddos, he builds rapport, before he says, hey, matter of fact, I've got a horse I need you to shoe. So he always tells me this story, it's about hitting a horse with a rasp. He said, I went out there to the ROs back there in the 60s, and he said, they got me in there, and it was about 4:00 in the afternoon, and that wagon boss told me, you got to get them 4 horses shod. We're leaving about 3:30 in the morning, but they all need to be wearing shoes by the time we leave. So I got in there, and he said, I dug around. There's a box of old tools there, and they all dust all over them. The rasp and rusty, and I got it out, and I dusted them off, and I was shoeing this. This one old horse was acting up, and he goes, I was about had enough, and I just reached back and smacked him right in the ribs with that old rasp. And about that time, the wagon boss come around the corner, and he said, hey, he said, don't be hitting the horse with that rasp. He said, I fired old boy about 20 years ago for doing that. And Boots said, I looked up at him and said, yeah, and I bet it's this same rasp too. So, all dull tools work the same, but you do get aggravated. I tell you, fortunately for me, I didn't know you worked for Craig Cameron. I didn't realize that. I've always liked the horsemen, the horse people, the people that, and so growing up, I was around a lot of really good horse people. Like your dad was one of them. I learned a lot of stuff from Koke, and I've heard I'm kind of going around in circles here.
No, that's all right.
I've heard I listen to all your podcasts, man. I'm a
Oh
fan,
yeah. No, we talk about most of them.
I like.
What's
them,
been
man.
your favorite one? And we'll come back to this thought.
You know what, man? I think each one of them have something that you pick stuff out for. I like the Navy SEAL guys. I like Eddie Gallagher. I liked his story. I liked like Course True and Dusty and those guys, and Ryan Wakefield and the guy in Cole and all of us really we're all intertwined. I was talking to Baker, my brother, about it the other day. And we're all intertwined in a way from our past and the people that we've been around and the people, you and your dad and how he helped develop me in a lot of ways when I was younger. I just looked up to him a lot and I liked Cowboy Cerrone. I like that one. Because I've had a lot of guys, you're always talking about, rolling, training and boxing and fighting and all that. Well, I've had a lot of guys that have worked for me that were really tough guys that trained and did all kinds of stuff. And so I always liked those, listening to the ones about, the jiu-jitsu and the boxing and training. Of course, your dad, he boxed, all of them boxed. And I guess the thing that really stifled them was their eyesight. They couldn't, Koke, him and Scotty, they couldn't see really good enough to continue boxing later on. That's what.
Dang, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he said, man, we'd have kept boxing. We couldn't see very good. So anyway, and I remember, and so like the ones with the, Tim Kennedy, and Clay Newcomb's. I've listened to Clay Newcomb's podcast because he did a deal with a guy named Warner Glenn. He was out there in Arizona.
Yeah.
He was the first guy to ever take a picture of a jaguar in the wild on American soil.
Yeah.
And so Warner Glenn, and he's 80 something, he's like Boots, and you're riding mules every day, all day long. And so Clay Newcomb did some,
Clay told me about him. He said I needed to have him on.
And actually Bryce went hunting with that guy one time.
Oh, really?
And Bryce, my brother, he's like a machine. Like he can go all day long,
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And so he said that guy was pretty tough to keep up with. And that's a lot coming from Bryce.
Oh, yeah.
And, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, just all of them have something to offer, and it's great for our industry. It's great for our lifestyle and I listen to a lot of different podcasts, but I really, and plus I know who you are and I know and so, and I know the people. And so it's always interesting to hear people's story.
Yeah.
And so I like those.
When I interrupted you, you were talking about horsemen and horse people and Craig, and you were going down a train of thought, but
it's just, horseshoeing has just been an avenue for us. I mean, and it's what I love to do. And I've been really blessed to be able to know the best horseshoers in the world, been around the best in the world and the best in the business. And the thing that's really unique about it is the people that we're around and the things that we've been allowed to do through that avenue, from day working to welding to building fence to breaking and training horses to being around, people in the horse show industry, hunter jumpers, people that have nothing to do with the cowboy way of life, but they still are. A horse is such an iconic figure in our business, in our world. I don't know that there's a day gone by that I haven't either been around a horse or seen a horse that I can remember.
Yeah.
And anywhere you go, you're going to be driving down the road, and here in a minute, you're going to see a horse. You're going to see a logo of a horse or something. And so, you know, just being around those people, and I always was around cowboys as a kid growing up, and I just wanted to be a cowboy and part of it. And fortunately for me, I've been able to create a lifestyle and living for myself with through the horses and through the people that I've been involved with and encountered in that.
Yeah.
You know, and your dad was a big part of that when I was a kid. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, talking about rodeoing and.
When did you first meet my dad?
Well, whenever I was a kid, when I was really young, he was he was the mask rider in the '80s, and that horse he rode actually came from the 4.6s. Miss Ann donated that horse to Texas Tech. She was a big contributor. He was Happy 6, I think.
6.
I'm pretty sure, maybe Happy 5 or 6. Happy 6. And anyway, that horse came from the 6s, and I had a connection with the 6s at that time because my dad worked for the 6s as he was younger. Then he moved off, went to college. Then he came back and he continued to shoe horses at the 4.6s, and I used to go down there with him whenever I was a little kid. So I've got a lot of history there at that ranch. Well, whenever they donated that horse, and your dad became the mask rider. Well, you know, I guess that I've been trying to remember how we first met, but it was probably with that horse, and he was connected to that, and my dad was connected to the mask rider program from the point of shoeing the mask rider horse, and then Koke would come over and bring the horse, and then I'd get to know him. Well, then about that time I was getting a little older, and I was around him a lot, and we'd go to they used to have a buck out at Dove Parks Arena. It was on 4th and Quaker in Lubbock. And man, the cars and traffic drive by, and I'd go out there with the older cowboys. I was probably 10 or 11.
Charlie's.
Well, Charlie would have all the stock, but then Koke would ride and he'd help Charlie, but then he'd fight bulls too, you know, and a lot of those older guys that were in his era, and so I always had this man. He just always in the middle of stuff. He's always working, always helping. And then whenever he become the mask rider, and I got to know him when he'd bring the horse and stuff, and then he took me to the football game with him. Took my brothers to the football game with him, and then whenever we went, well, your grandparents, they lived right on University, right on the road, you know, and so when the football teams coming from out of town would come by, you know, we're all out there on the road, you know, giving our Texas Tech signs and the mask rider horses out there, and it's kind of cool because, you know, they probably don't do stuff like that now, and so anyway, he took me to the games with him, and then he'd just start, and I'd say, man, I want to go to the rodeo on Saturday night, so he'd take me, and then we'd be, and I thought it was the coolest thing because here I'm a kid, and I go with Koke, and we're pushing bulls up, and I'm helping take flanks off and help take bronc saddles off and all that kind of stuff. And then we'd get done at night, and then Koke would drive the truck. He'd load all the cattle and bulls up and the horses, and we'd drive them to Charlie's in the truck. And I thought that was cool, you know, we're getting the truck, we're bouncing out there. It's not dark, you know, it's late. And when you're a kid, you always want to stay up late. You know?
For sure.
Anyway, so it was just cool. And he took me with him everywhere. And then I got to know Scotty, and then we were in Boy Scouts, all our brothers, and Corey, your uncle was in Boy Scouts with us, and he was a little short banty rooster. You know, he's a muscle bodybuilder and strong and big. You didn't really know Corey very well, did you?
No, he died the year I was born.
Yeah. So anyway, Corey, you know, I had that other connection there with Koke through Corey and the Boy Scouts, and of course your dad, he was Eagle Scout, and they were all in scouting together.
That was kind of everybody like. That was kind of the thing back then.
Well, in Lubbock, there was kind of unique. We had one of the largest scout troops in the United States right there in Lubbock.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And we did it was a lot different than it is now. We did our own summer camps. We did our own camp, you know.
Yeah, y'all went out to, what's that place in New Mexico? Didn't you
Philmont?
Philmont.
Yep.
Didn't y'all go out there?
I went to Philmont twice, and I was in scout. Yeah, and I was crew leader twice at Philmont, and, you know, and anyway. So, and then we had that connection, and I just kept that connection with Koke. And then I got a little older, you know, by that time, you know, I was still getting a little older, and Koke would need help. And I think I was trying to remember, I think Koke worked at the feedlot there for a little while. And I'd go to the Lubbock feedlot with some of the cowboys that rented a trailer house for my parents. I'd go put my saddle in the back of their truck at night before, and I'd go sleep in the back of their truck, you know, at night, so they wouldn't leave me the next morning. And we'd go out to the to the feedlot, and I'd ride pins with them in the afternoon, and then they'd throw me in the water trough every afternoon. I got so tired of it. And Koke, he always kind of took care of me. And anyway, so
when did he start shoeing with your dad?
And I think it was right about the time when he came to Mask Rider, and I got to go in places with him, and then we'd get out. They had a little old place out west of town, him and Scotty, and we'd be getting ready to go work cattle somewhere, and he'd want me to go with him, or he'd ask me to go with him. I don't know if he wanted me to go, but I've messed around with him enough that he had to have me. So anyway, we'd have to shoe a horse, and that was one thing that even as a younger kid, it was something that I had knowledge of just from doing it every day and being around it every day, that I actually felt like I had something to contribute, And so Koke and I, he'd just bang around on his shoes, and then I'd bang around to help him. We'd get one shot, and we really thought we were doing something. And we talked about it, and then just over time, how you start questioning what you're doing. Well, what about this? What about that? And so, then of course Koke, he could do anything. He's kind of like they said, you're a master of none. But Koke, he could do everything. He could weld, he could build fence, he could ride broncs, he could rope, he could shoe horses and work cattle. It didn't matter, and that's what I love. I wanted to be that guy, and so he was real instrumental. He was I've heard sometimes on your podcast too. People say, well, you don't ever really want to meet your hero, but I think if you meet your hero and they don't live up to what they should be, they may not be your hero. He was a hero of mine. He was one of them. There was a lot of guys that were instrumental. But when Koke started shoeing horses, it wasn't something that he did for a living. It was just something that he did extra. Something that he could do. If he was always kind of like a do-it-yourself kind of guy. If it could be done, he could do it or figure out a way to do it. And so I got a lot of that from Koke. Building fence. Remember one time it was in the spring. It was in March or April. It was maybe April or May, and we were in Dickens building fence, and I mean, it was nice weather, and we're building fence, and I mean, we're staying in this little old bitty. There's about 4 of us staying in this little old bitty camper trailer, about half the size of this room, and we get up the next morning. It's nice the day before, on long sleeve shirts, t-shirts, whatever. And that night it comes a blizzard and it snows. I mean, it's coming up. It's snowing. Snow's blowing. We get out. I don't hardly have a coat. I'm freezing to death. And that's whenever you see that movie, The Christmas Story, that kid sticks his tongue on the pipe. Well, Koke had this dually pickup and had these big bed rails on it, big pipe bed rails, and he wanted me to go get a shovel out of the back of the truck. And I went to get that shovel, and I was freezing. My hands were cold. And you just want to do something, touch something warm. And I stuck my tongue on that piece of pipe on the back of his truck, and it froze my tongue to the side of his truck. So I'm in there like that.
That's hilarious.
Oh, man. So I couldn't, he's like, bring that shovel, get over here, hurry up. And I'm like, so I couldn't tell him I stuck my tongue to the bed of the truck. So I'm trying to get it peeled off. And finally he comes over there and I peel it off, and my tongue's bleeding. But it was funny.
I remember them telling me that story.
It was funny.
Yeah.
But just shoeing horse, he could do anything. And just, I think that he just, it always kind of evolved. And once he was a mask rider and he got to bringing the horse to the shop, I think he got more interested in it, and it was just something extra for him to be able to do. And so whenever he decided to do something, he dove into it enough where he could be good at it. And it's not something he ever really did for a living, but it was something that he could dang sure do if he needed to.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, there's pictures, and him shoeing random horses, but he talked about learning a lot from Bernie and spending that time there, and and then all 3 of y'all. But I don't know much about that time frame. I think there's a picture somewhere of him tacking on one of the shoes on Happy Six, or didn't he ride 2 of them? Did one?
Well, see, okay, so whenever he had that horse, it's kind of interesting. It was an interesting time because he took him everywhere. Like if he wanted to go day work, heck, he'd just take him to go day work. I mean, one night, yeah, like I'm no kidding, man. He'd go get him and do. And so what happened was one night, one night a cow truck had dumped over on the loop. Cattle were scattered everywhere. So somehow they get a hold of Koke, and maybe they get a hold of Charlie or whatever. But anyway, they get a hold of Koke, and so he goes and gets Happy Six, and he saddles him up and goes out there to gather him. And I mean, heck, he'd taken Charlie's and, pick up broncs on him. He'd do all kinds of stuff. He'd do whatever he needed. He'd do it on him. And, but at that day and time, it was just different. People didn't freak out about stuff. Anyway, they
probably also didn't know, because there's no internet.
Yeah,
they probably didn't.
Probably not. It's probably not.
Anymore these days, there'd be a Snapchat going out like before you got the horse unloaded, but
right. So he's roping, gathering all these cattle up. Anyway, I don't remember if it was that night. I think it was that night. He ends up roping this bull, and that bull runs up the rope and jobs a horn right in the cheek of that horse's butt.
Ooh.
I mean, like runs it that far in its butt, in this muscle. And so, of course, obviously, he's sore sucker. You can't get around. And at some point there, and I don't know if that was if that was the time that it happened, but at some point they said that they had to retire him, and they got a new horse in, and they said it was because he had bowed a tendon, but
it was really because he was roping bulls on the interstate.
I think so, but anyway, I don't remember the exact story about it, but I know that he got him hooked pretty bad one night, and after that they had to let him off for a while, but then whenever they retired him, they left him with us, and so he was my horse until he died after that.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, they didn't take him back to the ranch. They kind of thought he was crippled. But heck, he was fine. He was tough. He's an old ranch horse. And so anyway, I kept him and rode him for years and years, and he finally died, and we buried him there on our place in Lubbock. And anyway, but those were good times. At Koke,
isn't there just like a few stories of stuff getting out?
Oh man,
on something about like just. I remember
they'd get out on the highway or over there at Dub Parks, on 4th and Quaker. They'd have those buckouts. They'd buck broncs and bulls and horses, and they'd buck bears and saddle broncs, and they'd buck bulls, and then they'd, and sometimes they'd get out. They'd get out of the arena and they'd run down the road. Somebody'd go get them, and there's always stuff like that happening over in Lubbock. Over the years. I mean, one night they dumped a cow truck over right there on the North Loop, and they called me, so I called Bryce, and he goes, "Man, I don't have a horse." I said, "I got you a horse. Don't worry about it." So I load up a bunch of horses, and we go out there, and of course, the cops are there, and they got their lights and their sign there, and of course, the cattle are going nuts, and we kind of get them bait up in this little old open area, and got them kind of gathered up. And it was dark, it was like midnight, and I just told the cops, I said, "Man, let's just leave them here for the night. Let's just kind of hang around and let them settle, and then we'll get some portable pins, and then we'll pin them in the morning when it's daylight, and then we'll." That way they can chill out. We're not chasing them all the time in the middle of the night. So anyway, we kind of do, and they kind of get scattered out. Well, they're big old F1 cows, come from over there at Dickens and old Bedford Jones. I think it was their cattle. Jones is over there. They're wild, And so we get them going, and we're going, and they're running through the residential area, and I got Bryce a horse, and he just cinches him up, steps on him. When he goes out to go catch this one cow, this horse just buries his head, bucks him off.
Oh, man.
I'm like, oh, no.
Ever since I started riding bulls and punching fools, I've been wearing an American hat because I'm an American. I actually wore a different hat before that for the longest, but then my mom got a job. So wear an American hat, old son. Otherwise, you ain't no cowboy.
Well, Bryce, he just hangs on to the reins. He just pulls him around, steps back on him, goes on. And we're chasing these two cows. And in those residential areas, some of those smaller houses out north of town, they have a car parked in the driveway and then another car parked behind it. So you can't really get down the sidewalk. You have to go around. Well, these two cows, I mean, they're big old. They're probably like 1,200 piece, big old horn F1 cows. And they're running right down the middle of the sidewalk. Bryce and I are going behind them, trying to keep our horse from falling down. And these two cows tried to jump these two cars that were parked head to tail, and this landed right in the hood of that car and just flattened it. And we're like, oh man. So she climbs off of the car and goes out there. And so we end up roping. We didn't ever go back. So I don't know whatever happened to that deal, but she just smashed the hood of that car. And we go down, we get them all roped, and we tied cattle down all day. And it's about 1:00 in the afternoon. By then we'd been up all night. We were tired. And so we there's always something like that going on.
Yeah.
And they'd always call us because we were, I don't know how they got our number. I guess because our stuff got out all the time. The sheriff had our number, and they're like
Right.
calling us, "Are those y'all's?" Nope, they're not ours. But anyway,
Every single time something gets out in this town, they call me. And it's
of course,
the 1 out of 40 times it happens, it'll be mine, but most of the time it's not. But they, no, I just remember when I was a kid, my dad telling a story about just he was out there and at some point, like he took a truck and a trailer and a horse, obviously, and he just had one of the deputies drive the truck and trailer, and so he's on the horse, and this bull is just, you know how they're like, I'm gonna go this way no matter what, you know, and they just get in that. Well, he has him going that way no matter what down the road, and he has that sheriff. He's like, pull out in front of him and then slam on the brakes. He's like, now stop, and that bull just skids his chin into the trailer, you know. But
that's
I guess Charlie had, and I got some pictures, but a couple of matching paint pickup horses.
Yep.
You remember those?
oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I guess that's what one of the horses
He had
did
some.
ride.
He had some buckskin horses too. And when I used to go with Koke to Charlie's on Saturday night, and I always wanted to do something. You know how it is when you're a kid, man. You want and
Be
you want
involved.
to make you want to make Koke proud. You want him to know that you're handy. You know.
Yeah.
And so one night they always get on a horse and push bulls out of the arena. You know, after during the bull riding, and they had a big buck. He had two done big buckskin horses, and one of them he'd buck in the bareback riding. He'd buck him in the bears, derig and shoot and derig him, and then they'd put a bridle and saddle on him, saddle him up, and then they'd run bulls out on him after that. And so one night, I always thought that was the coolest thing, you know. And I was like, man, I love that horse. And then one night, Coke said, "Hey," he said, "Blane, you're gonna have to push bulls out of the arena on that horse. Go catch him after they buck him in the bears and unrig him. Go saddle him up." And I'm like,
You thought it was cool until you had to ride him.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not. I don't. I'm a cowboy, but I'm not more cowboy than you, you know. So anyway, so I go saddle him up, and I'm like, oh man, I'm dreading it. So I saddle him up, and get on him, and go out in the arena, and Coke, he said, "Blaney," he said, "if them bulls come after you," he said, "don't worry about it. Just turn his head loose and let him go where he wants to. He won't get you in a bind." I said, "Okay."
Dang.
So man, I get on him. Oh man, the whole time I'm puckered up, you know. And then after I rode him around there a minute, he was cool. But they'd buck that horse in the bareback riding, and heck, they'd pick up broncs on him. They'd push bulls out on him. He had a couple like that over the years. Charlie did, but it was pretty cool. And then later on, you know, whenever I went off to college, and I'm an Aggie too. Like I went to A&M, you know, and I couldn't get in tech. I mean, everybody said, "Man, how come you went to A&M?" I said, "That's the only place they let me in."
Yeah.
You know, my dream was to grow up and be the mask rider like Coke. You know, that's what I wanted to do. And then went off to college and college rodeoed, and went to Howard College first, and then went to Big Spring. Then went to A&M, and then went to Alpine to Sul Ross. And so anyway, but it was just, you know, and I'd come back home from break and stuff, and I'd go help Charlie pick up and stuff. And all that stuff I learned just from being around Coke and going with him when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When did Wendell come on the scene?
Man, Wendell, you know, Wendell, he's kind of like Coke. You know, I've been around him since I was little. I mean, I've always known Wendell my whole life. I mean, I don't really know when Wendell came on the scene, but it just seemed like he was always around. You know,
Yeah.
Whenever I was younger, I mean, I always knew Wendell from just when I was a kid. You know,
Uh-huh.
I knew all the college guys. You know, when I was little, that's who I wanted to hang around with. I didn't really, I mean, even whenever I was in junior high and high school, I had some friends that I hung around with, but most of the time I was with those guys. You know, I was with the older cowboys and stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
And then Brian Burson, would he have been around about that same time?
Brian Burson. You know, I might have been. See, I graduated from high school in '86, and then when I graduated, I was gone. I mean, I took off.
Oh, okay? Because I think he and Corey. He said that during college, him and Corey were like tight.
And see, Corey was a little older than me, and so Corey, when I graduated from high school and stuff, I kind of moved on, and Corey had moved off to Austin or somewhere like that by then,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, he's doing his thing in Austin, and so I really wasn't around Corey a whole lot after that. I was around him more in when we were in scouting, and of course I mean we were pretty tight
Yeah.
too, and whenever we were in scouting. But Corey kind of he really didn't do the cowboy scene like Koke and Scotty did, but we were pretty close until I moved off, and then I kind of lost track of him.
Yeah, so I mean, I heard all those stories, and every now and then when I was little, Pop would go back and help Charlie some, and so like I remember like being maybe 7 years old, and we went and we'd do Amarillo, because it was still a big 4th of July rodeo that Charlie had, and so I feel like for a few summers there when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, we'd go do Amarillo, and he'd drive the truck back and forth, between there and Lubbock and swapping stock, and he was picking up, and I'd dress up like a little rodeo clown, but I heard a lot of those stories, and then in high school when we put on rodeos for a few summers, Wendell would come pick up with him, and every now and then Bryce would come judge or something, and so I guess it was around high school really that and then I'd go out to Charlie's and get on bulls, and occasionally here and there, and but I got to hearing those stories, and I guess that was some of the first times that it was more than just my dad telling them, you know what I mean? And so kind of like I don't know, it just kind of validated it, I guess. Not that I thought he was lying, but anyhow, just something.
Man, he did everything. Like I remember going to Charlie's, and he might ride a bronc, he might ride a bareback horse, he'd pick up, he'd flank, then he might get then Charlie might flank, and Koke might be fighting bulls. I mean, he just did. I mean, whatever it was to be done, he just did it. I mean, it was crazy. And I never really was into the bullfighting deal. I just never really wanted to do that, but I just never thought I could do it. But he did everything. I mean, he'd pick up broncs, he could flank, he'd sort, he'd go back there and sort. I mean, he was just everywhere. He just like a little border collie dog, he's just like over here, over there. And, and then of course I got older, and when I graduated from high school, he went to teaching, and after he graduated from college, he was teaching, and, you kind of start going your separate ways. And I like I say, it wasn't the internet, wasn't cell phones or any of that. So we kept up with each other, but it wasn't like we can now, and,
right.
And then, when y'all moved off, when he moved off, and then I remember when he was at the Pitchfork, I remember when they did all that, and I kept up with him just kind of, through friends and stuff, and then of course life happens, and then I didn't, back to going to college, and then he went back to A&M, got his master's at A&M, and then you went to A&M, and of course I know Kermit Moss and all them guys.
Oh, really?
I used to shoe horses for Kermit, and when you talk about him on the show, and I liked old Kermit, and back then he was roping with Tyler Magnus, and I got to shoe horse for those guys, and then just there was a lot of guys around College Station that I really had a lot of fun. I shot horses over there to it's what I did to make a living. And once I graduated, I thought, man, there got to be something.
Did you hang out at his place a lot? I'm sure
I did. I went to Kermit's a lot. And the way I got Kermit one long time ago was married to a lady. She was a veterinarian, and I had a lot of rapport with a lot of veterinarians because of just the access that I had to him from my dad. I mean, and that's been a huge part of my business too. Is I've got a ton of friends in the veterinary world, and
I'm sure there's just like a whole layer of trust, just like a foundation of trust. I'm sure, like when they hear the Chapman name, like, oh, okay, well, he can shoe this horse for sure. Like I can trust this guy with my horse.
Right, and you still have to. The thing about it is I was very fortunate because I really wanted to do a good job. I wanted to uphold that. I wanted to uphold that respect and that. And it was real important to me, kind of like any of us. If you have anything about you at all, you want to actually be able to uphold your name and your tradition and what you want to try to continue to grow. And so I was very fortunate in that. Whenever somebody called me that was on that level, or had called me because of maybe who my name or whatever. I really wanted to make sure that I did a good job,
Yeah.
and so it put a lot of pressure. It puts a lot of pressure on you, when
Yeah, I
you're
mean,
younger.
you also it doesn't take long to ruin a reputation. So you obviously did a good job. Otherwise, a dozen horses in, if people could be saying the opposite. And
Yeah.
especially with all, like all three of y'all had to do that, because if one person was a crappy horseshoer, then people would get y'all mixed up so much they might think all three of you were that way.
Matter of fact, you made me famous with the crimping because everybody actually thinks that's me.
Oh yeah,
It's funny. I get it everywhere I go. They're like, "Hey man, I saw you on that DB video." I'm like, "Yeah." Then I'm like, "No man." I'm like, "No, that was my brother Bryce." But anyway,
that video of how to shoe a horse with Bryce went bananas.
it's crazy.
Oh my gosh. And I think what it might have been was one thing that helped is good information, number one. But that boy that was working for me at the time, Nick, he did take a stomping from that barrel horse.
And it wasn't staged. That's what's crazy about it. And most of the people, most of the guys out there that shoe horses that ask me about it, because I've been pretty fortunate. I speak at a lot of big deals, in the farrier industry, and do a lot of seminars and presentations and stuff, and a lot of people ask me about that. And the big thing about it is those people, they know, they're like, man, that wasn't.
Yeah,
they know it wasn't
no.
staged. And
Heck
and
no,
they've
I would
been in
never do that.
situation.
Like let's get this horse to this bronc. Like, no, you can see him kind of winding up, and that kid doesn't know. It's the first time to ever get under a horse, even. But looking back, the way it's set up, I was so grateful that when I did, post that video and it got so much attention that I used a Chapman, because it's just like, if pretty much, in my opinion, if anybody had anything to argue with, then I would just not even listen. It's like, okay, no. This is the standard. If you want to argue, then you're just a keyboard warrior or whatever, because I didn't just use any farrier. And so that was what was cool for me, that particular video did well. It's like, oh, okay, I know that video did well. Well, it's good information.
Right.
And so, no, that was fun to do.
It's funny because
Do you want one of these?
I told somebody, I said, I don't really drink anything but water, coffee, and unsweet tea. And I said, you know what? If I drink a ranch fuel, it's going to be with DB.
There you go.
It's going to be with DB.
Well, that one's for free.
Energy drink.
The
next one
one
cost me 15% off, huh?
He does listen. Yeah.
Hey, I tell you what, they sell the mountain offs at the G-Bows, and I go to G-Bows there in Vernon, and like during the day, like we get to work and we work and I've never been one to, I never drank a lot of water and stuff. I just I'd work and then I'd drink something at lunch, and then I'd work and I'd get guys working for me and they're like, man, you think we could get something to drink? I'm like, water hose right over there, go get you a drink. If you don't drink, go get you a drink, So I just keep on going, and then, and then over the course of time, you get a little older, and then I had some guys work for me, and they're like, man, you think we could get some water? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. We'll get some water. And so I'm like, okay. So I start buying water, get a little cooler and put some ice in it. And then I go to drinking water, and I'm like, dang, it's not a bad idea, because I'm not going to drink anything all day, and I don't, not on purpose. It just kind of gets going. But, you do get to a little, when you get a little older, you start wanting to take better care of yourself and eat right and do those kind of things, and so I do the mountain off stuff a lot, but I try to do the ones that don't have sugar and a lot of caffeine, because I, if you drink 600-800 milligrams of caffeine all day, you're just lying. And me, I'd be
sleep
upside down. And so anyway, but it's kind of funny. So I get those mountain off energy bar, those bars, and I'll eat them. Stuff to kind of keep your energy level up.
I just had one actually before we started, but
that's not bad.
Yeah.
But I don't drink any energy drinks or nothing. I drink water, coffee, and tea. That's it. I hadn't had a sugary drink, and I can't tell you how long.
Yeah.
And I listen to your deal. I think about everybody. The carnivore diet and all that stuff. I listen to all that stuff.
Yeah.
Try to eat that. You heard that story, back, your dad, he was a poet too, and I don't know if I got some of that from him or not, but Baxter, Blahit, all those poems, and everybody, I listen to your podcast and you talk about the things that you eat and the things that you drink and the things you don't. The world's on a diet, right?
Oh, yeah.
And no matter where you look, every fruitcake with the recipe's got a diet book. But I think if they were honest, I believe they'd all concede the omnivorous indifference of a cowboy is all you need.
That's it.
Yeah, he's in tune with Mother Nature. Live off the land from the mountains of Montana to the muddy Rio Grande. He's the ultimate consumer. He'll eat anything he finds. I've seen him lick the peel and paint off of Forest Service signs, chew a steel fence post just to get down to the meat. They'll eat playing cards and barbed wire, anything a cow would eat. A drumstick from a buzzard to a wilted Christmas wreath. Finish with a porcupine just to pick his teeth. Drinks water from a cow track. Eats the claws of a grizzly bear, and you won't find no leftovers. He eats feathers, bones, and hair. Make hunters run for cover. Scares hikers half to death, and he leaves no trace behind him, just the smell of his bad breath. If you doubt what I've told you, I'll assure you that it's right, because I've painted you a picture of a cowboy's appetite. Though it may not look too pretty, it's exactly like I've drawn it. Shoot, he'd probably eat a bale of hay if you put ranch fuel on it. So the world keeps on jogging and sipping diet pop while the cowboy and his tapeworm ride the range and eat nonstop. So if you're overweight and worried, you should dine with him a while, because there ain't no chubby cowboys in existence in the wild. Cheers, Dale.
Cheers. I love that, because there ain't no chubby cowboys.
It's fun. I think about, I think about all your stuff. Shoeing horses has been, we talk about that. I mean, I grew up shoeing horses, and they got all these certifications, and I'm certified through the American Farriers Association, journeyman farrier, and it's taken me a lot of places, and I've got to be, I've got to actually work for a lot of the people that you've had on here, all these ranches, the Stewarts, the Sixes, the Pitchforks, the Wagners. Man, it's really cool, the people that own these ranches, that have the horses, that have the cattle, that are part of the niche that we live, that allow us to do things we like to do, day working and rodeoing, and that's the cool thing about it. You've had everybody on here. You've had rodeo cowboys to from rodeo cowboys to horseshoers to day work guys to owners, and it's those ranches and those people and those horses that have allowed us to do what we love to do. And like going to school at A&M, I got to meet a lot of people, and from there I went to Alpine and got my master's at Alpine. I actually coached the rodeo team for about 3 years when I was at Alpine.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
And so I've done. You asked me earlier what got me in a horseshoe, and I've done a little everything, and I've enjoyed it all. It's because of the people I've been around, and that's what it's all about. It's the people.
Yeah, it's the ultimate side hustle for a cowboy.
It is,
because and it's crazy too, like how many people know how to do it but just don't want to. Like there's a lot of guys that might get somebody else to shoe their horses,
right?
And they know how,
right?
But I think it's a great, especially if you can get to where you walk around one pretty quick. What's the most you think you've shot in a day?
Oh man, it's funny because we go talking about this. There'll be some horseshoes listening. He's lying. But whenever I was in college, I was pretty gritty, and I thought I was anyway. And one day I shot 21 horses by myself. Damn. I'm not saying that's a good idea. Looking back now, it probably wasn't the best idea. It just, man, when you're young and you're trying to make a living, you're trying to go to school, pay your way to college.
You can have a day like that every now and then.
Yeah, I got started early, and it was probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night when I got done. But I didn't have to go home to anybody. I mean, heck, I was going to college. I didn't have anywhere else to be. And, somebody says, hey, can you do 4 over here? Yeah, I'll do them. They do. And before you know it, you're counting feet. Man, I got 4 feet left. I can do this. I got this. And that's where you get your, we call it your Navy SEAL status. I've got some guys that I've had a lot of really, really cool guys work for me over the years.
Yeah.
And I've had some guys that, you know, we'd do a bunch of horses. I had 2 guys that worked for me, Ishmael Garcia and Chris Cruz, and I taught them both how to shoe horses, and they both, you know, and Ishmael, he came from the ghetto, like he was a gangster, straight up gangster, didn't know the front of the horse and the back, and you know, and Chris Cruz was working for me one day. He wrote up on this, kind of to get to your point about shooting a lot of horses. I kind of get around telling stories, but you know, we got to where when I had help, you know, we do 25 a day, 5 days a week, but I had 2 good helpers. But the most I ever did by myself one day was about 21 head, and I was in college, and it took me all day. And
Yeah.
and I wish I could go back and see what kind of job I actually did, you know.
Right.
But anyway, I had these 2 guys work for me. Chris Cruz, he rides up on this Mustang mare one day. I'm trimming horses at the shop in Lubbock when I still lived in Lubbock, and he goes, "Hey man, can you trim this horse?" I don't know him from Adam, and I look at and I see those brands on her neck, and I look at her feet, and her feet were all looked like Liberty Bell. And I'm like, I said, man, I tell you what, I don't really have time right now. My brother's right down the road shooting horses. He's right down there, and he was just right down the road. Baker was. I said, go down there and see if he can trim her. And I'm thinking, I don't want to deal with this today. So anyway, long story short, he goes down there, Baker couldn't do it, and he come back. I said, I tell you what, come back in the morning when we got some time, and I'll help you with him. And so I helped him get her trimmed, and he started working for me, and then he asked, he said, man, I got a buddy that's kind of in a bind. He doesn't have a job right now. He just wants to go with us, and you mind if he comes and goes with us? I said, yeah, but I'm not gonna pay him. He just come and hang out. So he comes. He's got a ponytail down the back of his hair, you know, longer than yours, and it's all braided. And he didn't say much, and he goes to work. We ended up staying all week, and he worked for me that whole week, and he got to getting in there and getting after it. And I said, I'll tell you what, I said, if you want to come to work next week, I said, I can't pay you a lot, but I'll pay you something because I'm not going to work you for free. He goes, yeah, I'll do it. And they worked for me for about three or 4 years together.
Dang.
Both of them did. And I mean, we did a bunch. We went to the sixes one day a week. We went to a vet clinic one day.
So you've been doing the sixes deal one day a week a long time.
Probably about 26 or 27 years. Dang. Going down there. And I take a crew with me, obviously, but, you know, when I first moved back to Lubbock from Alpine, I get a phone call and you know those times when you're broke, you're like, man, something's got to give. There's got to be something better. And you know, you're kind of getting by and everything. And one day I get a call from Dr. Blahit from Sixes. Of course, I still had didn't have a cell phone or anything. Just had a phone at the house and with a answer machine. And I called him back, and he said, "This is Glenn Blahit." He said, "I'd wonder if you'd be interested in shooting the horses here at the Sixes." I said, well, yeah, I'd be interested in it. I said, you know what? He goes, well, they usually come about every 2 weeks, and they just kind of stay a few days in the bunkhouse, and we can do whatever you like. And we're kind of needing to get them done. And the last guy, whatever, he explained it all, you know, real quiet guy. So I said, yeah, sure. So I show up. I said, I'll be there Tuesday or whatever. So I go down there by myself first time. I pull up there, go to the office. Nobody knows anything. I'm coming. Nobody knows a word. Nobody knows anything. So I go down there, and I talked to a girl named T that she was there at the time. And I said, I'm Blane Chapman. I said, I'm supposed to come shoe the horses. And I said, Dr. Blahit called me. She goes, oh, really? Oh, okay. So they start gathering stuff up, and they start getting me a list. And it went on from there. And when I got done at the end of the day, I went in his office. I said, how do y'all do this? He goes, well, they just kind of come every couple of weeks. I'll call them, and they'll come stay a couple of days, and then I'll call them back. And I said, what would you think about me just coming every week? And he goes, you'd do that? I said, I don't know how else you'd do it. I said, I have no idea how else you'd do it in order to keep up. Because, I mean, there was horses everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
And anyway, he said, yeah, that's fine. So I started going every week and been going every week ever since. And it's been really good. I've got to meet a lot of cool people, and it's been a good thing.
Dr. Blahit was a closet Dale Brisby fan.
Oh, he loved you, man. He loved Dale Brisby, man.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Blahit was. If most people, you know, there's probably some people out there that watch this podcast, obviously, that knew Dr. Blahit, but he was a man of few words, but very wise and very iconic in our industry. And he did a lot. He did a lot for that ranch. He did a lot for the people that worked there. He wasn't a micromanager. And he was always on his phone. And I mean,
Legend.
he loved Dale Brisby. He
That
watched
was so
all
funny
the
to me,
time.
like, because I'd been day working there for a few years, you know, and he's so quiet,
Mhm.
and you know, and so you kind of think like very serious, you know, and
He's
it's
a little
just
intimidating.
intimidating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. Like you're just like, this is the boss, you know, and the
Mhm.
legend, and he's the vet, and they're not notoriously just like, you know, pranksters or jokers or anything like that. And so like I was always like, yes, sir, you know, like you don't know who I am, but you know,
Right.
thanks for having me kind of deal. And then one day just somebody was like, you know this, and apparently like at breakfast in the mornings over there, he'll just be like watching the deal.
Yeah, yeah. At lunch, breakfast, all the time. You know, it's funny. You know, he was really serious like that, and he. I mean, you know, you just man, you couldn't. It was hard to go talk to him because. Well, I'll tell you one thing he taught me. He taught me to not make off the cuff decisions because I would ask him something and he would go, "I'll think about that." I'm like, "Okay." So
Oh, dang.
anyway, oh yeah, but anyway, it's funny because you know Bryce, my brother, he's a prankster. Anyway, Dr. Blodgett
A little
had-
more off the cuff.
Yeah, he had this. Dr. Blodgett had this felt hat and it had this grease ring all the way around it, you know. And he didn't wear stuff like that very often, but for some reason he had this felt hat and had this big old grease ring around the top of it. And Bryce, he hadn't been to the Sixes with me maybe once or twice. He was down there that day, and we were in the vet clinic part, kind of underneath, and they were looking at they were x-raying a horse, and we were looking at the radiographs and stuff and trying to decide what to do for him. And Dr. Blodgett walks around there, you know, and he's trying to be serious because he's going to ask me a question because he's got stuff to do. You know, they're palpating mares and everything. Well, Bryce was standing there with me, and Dr. Blodgett walks around there, and he goes, "Well, Blane, what do you think?" And when he talks, you just listen. You don't interrupt. And before he could get finished, Bryce goes, "Hey, Doc, did you buy that hat with that sweat ring already around it like that, or did you?" And Dr. Blodgett just, you know, he just turned and looked at him. He goes, "That's all he said." And I'm like, "Oh." I'm thinking, man, today's my last day for sure. But it was funny. But Bryce, you know, he's the only guy that can do stuff like that. And get
Oh
away
my
with it.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
anyway, but now Baker, my younger brother, he goes with me. We go every week, and he meets me down there. He comes from Lubbock, and when I moved from Lubbock to Vernon, you know, I was kind of in transition, trying to, you know, start over again, get my business rebuilt, and I've rebuilt a horseshoeing business in about 5 or 6 different places over time. So I kind of had an idea on what I wanted to do. Fortunately for me, it was the same distance from Vernon to Sixes as it is from Lubbock to the Sixes. So it didn't really change my travel a whole lot. And so Baker, he comes from Lubbock and meets me there. We go every Tuesday now. And so anyway, we just go there, and they got a list for us, and we go through the list. And then of course, you know, and then
I remember the first time I saw you over there, I had been rodeoing with Cole and Reggie, and that was when I first got to even go over there. As Reggie
Hatfield
had me over there, and anyways, he was like, "Well, let me come over here. I'll show you around." So we stopped by bunkhouse, and he was like, "This is true." And Dusty Burson, and I was like, "Yes, sir. I've known them since I was like little." And they were like, "Hey, what's up? Been a while." And he was like, "Oh, okay, you already know him." He's like, took me over to Mare Barn. We walked up. He was like, "This is Phil Fox, and you know he's been here." And I was like, "Oh, yes, sir." And he was like, "Yeah, I was at," and we talked. And he's like, "Yeah, I knew your dad from way back when." And then we went around the corner. And he was like, "Here's Blane and Baker Chapman." And he was like, "Yeah, I mean, I've known them since before I was born." And
yeah.
Reggie was like, "All right, whatever. I don't know what to do." Then
Yeah.
he's just introducing me to everybody, and we got to you guys, and y'all know more about you. You knew more about me than I did. You know, definitely knew more about my dad than I did. And anyways, it was that was funny, but that was the first time I saw y'all over there. It was the first time I'd seen you in a long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that might have been the first time I'd probably, you know, that might have been one of the first times I'd really officially met you when you were old enough to know that, you know,
Yeah.
you know, and of course y'all had moved off everywhere, and of course I knew your mom, I love your mom. She's the greatest.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
You were probably around. Didn't she date Corey first?
You know what? I really wasn't. I didn't.
I
Really
think
get
she.
that
I think Corey
personal with them. But
took her on a date. My dad was like, "No, I'm going to date her."
either her, I'm either her, you know, and then Spunky, you know, her sister ran on Spunky. She was crazy. The first time I met Spunky, I'm like, golly, they're just cool, you know, they're
Yeah.
just cool chicks, and anyway, and yeah, and she was kind of, I think she was dating like Randy White at that time, the football player, wasn't she? Or
Spunky?
Newt or somebody like. Anyway, they all went to school at. I think she was dating a football player at the time. Went to school at UT or something. But anyway, but yeah, it was all good. You know, I got to do a lot of stuff with your dad. You know, he taught me a lot about building fence, cowboying. We shot horses. We did everything together. And
When
then-
did you? All you guys are also really handy with ropes.
well,
Did you? I mean, yeah, okay. Except that one time.
yeah, that one time.
What
No.
happened with your thumb? Tell me about that first.
Total Feeds is what keeps the herd powered here at Radiator Ranch, and Total Equine is what I've been giving Boone for 10 years. He's 24 years old and still going strong. You can get it on Chewy.com or a dealer near you.
Man, we've roped our whole life. You know, we just grew up roping, and we go to, my wife ropes, and she ropes really good, and we rope together a lot, and we go to the World Series finale in Vegas every year. You know, we go stay 10 days, and we rope, go to the finals, do all that fun stuff. And this last year, we were getting ready to go, and I was probably roping better than I have in my life, and got some really good horses. And you know, I've always ridden sixes horses, and anyway, we were practicing, and first year just hopping around there wasn't any big deal. I just roped him, dallied, and dropped a coil over my thumb, cut my thumb off. And yeah, it was kind of one of those deals. It wasn't that big a deal, and it's like, well, it is what it is. I know guys all over that. I said, you know, they have a number system in the roping. You know, you can go from like a 3 to a 10. The 10s are the best in the world. A handicap system, and I go, well, now I'm a 9, so
Yeah.
I'm going to be one of the best. But no, Bryce, you know, we grew up roping. We had a little old dog and pony show when we were kids. We'd go. My mother would take us around, and we'd sing and recite poetry, and Bryce would do his rope tricks, and I'd kind of MC his little rope trick deal. And so we always were around cowboys. And then I had roping calves whenever I was in junior high, and I took those roping calves, and Dad take me to the bank and got the banker to work with me, get me a loan to get some calves, and I'd have roping calves, and they'd pay me, the college kids would pay me so much a head a month to rope, and then they taught me how to rope. You know, the Henley brothers, Ab and Roy Don Henley from out there at Fort Sumner, they were going to school there at the time. They kind of taught me how to rope calves, and then you know, and I always wanted to be a good horseman. That's what I always wanted. That's one thing we're talking about horseshoeing, you know, and roping and stuff. It really helped me, and just riding horses and being around cowboys, it helped me be a better horseman. And you know, and so we just always roped. Dad always made sure we had something to ride. You know, we didn't know, I had to make a lot of my own horses, and so I was always around a lot of guys. You know, like your dad, when I first got big, when I got big enough to actually break up my own horse and do it myself, you know, I was around your dad a lot, watched him, and you know, at that time Ray Hunt had been around, and a lot of people were using Ray Hunt's method to start horses, and so I was around a lot of really good horsemen whenever I was younger, and so in doing that, it helped me whenever I started roping calves and roping steers, and then going on to college, and we all college rodeoed, and I always had a horse that I'd bought that was kind of broke, kind of go do something on, and I just trained him myself, and I never really had a trained horse until I got older, because I could never afford one, you know, and so we all roped. And Bryce, of course, he's a phenomenal hand with the rope. You know, he's done rope tricks, been to the White House twice, performed for the president, and we've gone to Washington D.C. with him. That's fun, you know, and
Yeah.
some of the pictures that you can see on his Facebook page or on his, you know, when you look him up on the internet, he's got a picture of his paint horse rearing up in front of the White House. And I took that picture with the camera just sitting on the south lawn of the White House, and it just kind of happened to be to work. And so, yeah, we've always roped, and we've been around the rodeo world like you know, just grew up in it. So, and all of it just tied together, you know, and I went to college, and I roped calves and stuff, and roped steers. And then I wanted a third event, and I always said, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to ride bulls. I would never ride a bareback horse. That's the dumbest thing you can do.
Right.
You got on a horse, He's running loose, nothing on his head. You can't control what he does. And but I'd started, you know, when I was breaking horses and learning, and a lot of guys had been to Ray Hunt, and Ray Hunt started a lot of those horses without anything on their head. You know, saddle them up, kind of pull them around with rope, get on them, take the rope off, and just let them go, and just kind of let them go where they want, and just kind of ride them. Because if you weren't pulling on their face, then they might run off, but they wouldn't buck. And Ray Hunt would say, "Well, you can ride him as fast as he can go." You know, and so stuff like that made a lot of sense to me. And whenever a guy named Byron May, he was a feedlot cowboy, lived up there at Lubbock, and he'd done a lot of Ray Hunt stuff. And I watched them ride some colts, and he helped me the first couple of times when I started riding them like that, and not putting anything on their head, and just letting them go off, or just riding a halter and tying it to the saddle horn and not touching them. And so then I was like, man, if I can ride a horse like that, I can ride a bareback horse.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that big a deal. There's a pickup man out there to come save me, you know. And so when I got to college at Big Spring, I got a third event. I started riding bareback horses, and I was terrible. I didn't want to practice. I didn't want to get on a bunch of practice horses, but we had some really good practice horses. And my college roommates, they were good bareback riders. And because I was going to college bareback riding when Denny McClanahan, Ty Murray, all of those guys, you know, all the toughs in the world. Gaffney was riding bulls. So there were some tough bareback riders then. And so I kind of got my foot in the door, started at junior college at Big Spring. And then that summer I'd go to those junior rodeos and try to get some experience. And then I spurred the spur dummy a lot. I liked doing that. And then I just always roped. And so I was always around the ropers, around the rough stock guys. So I had the best of both worlds. And then I got to A&M, and I was the only rough stock rider at A&M at the time. And the very first college, and I'd been working on it pretty hard. And the very first rodeo was Uvalde. I go to Uvalde, and I 40% them in the bareback riding. And I'm thinking, man, I can do this, you know. And it was pretty cool because, you know, I really wasn't that great of a bareback rider whenever I was in junior college. And I kind of developed, and I would go to these rodeos with all these guys, and I would draw the best horse, like these amateurs. And those guys like, man, that's when you got out. Man, how did you get her? I would love to have her. And then I'd get bucked off of her, you know. And finally one day at Portales, the college rodeo, when I was in junior college, I go to Portales, Edgar Wilson's has it. And I get on this black horse, comes out there and blows up, not strong or anything, and then starts turning back. You know, you can just kind of hang a leg and just go to hooking them with your outside leg or whatever. And I got in the middle, and I didn't really, couldn't believe I was still on, and I just turned loose. I get bucked off. And boy, after that, I was so aggravated at myself, and I thought, what a wuss. You know, I just freaking hang on. Don't turn loose. And from that time on, I just said, you know what? Don't freaking be a wuss. Freaking hang on, be tough, and freaking stay on them. And so it just kind of manifested itself from there. So I went to A&M and rodeoed there, and it was fun because I did really good in the bareback riding and continued to rope and
Dr. Al wasn't there then, was he?
Al
Wagner.
Man,
He might
I
have
think
come
Dr.
after.
Hesby's was there, and Dr.
He might have shown up later.
Yeah, I don't remember him. But anyway, long story short, you know, we were an intramural rodeo program at A&M at the time, and we were in bad standing, man. We didn't have good, you know, you got to go to the meetings. We didn't go to the meetings, so you get all these points deducted. And they were just going to kick us out. You know, they were like, we're done with y'all. And so it was my first time to be at A&M, and for our first rodeo meeting, everybody's talking. Well, the first college rodeo, everybody's talking about, we're not going to go to the A&M rodeo. It's no good. It's not, you know, and everybody's like, I'm like, how do you not go to a college rodeo? Because in our region at Big Spring, we had our rodeo coach, Dusty Johnston, they did a good job. They were organized, and people wanted to come. It's good rodeos. And then over there, which I've tried to get, I've wanted you to get Jim Watkins on here.
For sure.
You know.
Yeah.
Jim Watkins, like, he's a legend. You know, he had all those guys, Ty Murray.
That's what I've heard.
And
I met him one time in Vegas in passing.
Right. And, you know, you know, and his son was a Navy pilot, and Todd Watkins. And Todd, I wanted you to get him on too before. And Todd rode with Cody Lambert and Ty and all those guys. Lane, he was kind of in that era. They had a Good Times van, you know, and they'd show up to college rodeo, and you're like, man, those guys are legit, you know. And so anyway, but then Todd, he decided to go off to the Navy, and so he was the Navy pilot and Top Gun instructor. And so he flies now, but he was an awesome rodeo cowboy too. So anyway, when I got there at A&M, they're like, man, people in the other colleges were like, we're just not going to go to the A&M college rodeo. So I go to the meeting and I'm like, man, what's the deal? So I get to talking about it and they said, well, why don't you just be we'll just let you be the committee chairman for the rodeo. I'm like, oh man, I got the ideas. I don't want to actually do the work, And so anyway, a guy named Marty Linder, he'd been there a while, and some other people. We decided that we'd get together and go talk to the Intramural Association. So anyway, I talked to I talked to Mac Altizer. I said, hey man, because Sammy Catalina, he was the one that's having all the rodeo. He was the one that's furnishing the stock. He had decent stock here but we were kind of piecing everything together, roping calves and steers and bucking stock. And so, and of course, Aggies, they stick together, and we didn't want to push Sammy out on the deal, but because he was good to his program. He was really good to A&M and our program. And however, we were just kind of in a bind. So I went to Mac and I said, hey, would you have our college rodeo? And he goes, yeah, I'll do it. And so I talked to Dr. Evans. That's who it was, Dr. Evans at the time. He was a horse specialist there, and he was also our sponsor. And so I said, Mac wants to have a rodeo. And he goes, well, we can't afford him. We're not going to do that. And I said, well, he's going to come to the meeting Tuesday next week, and he's going to give us a presentation. So I called Mac. I said, man, he doesn't want to do it, but I told him you were coming anyway. He said, yeah, that's fine. He goes, where's he from? And I said, Edna. He goes, oh man, that's awesome. He goes, he goes, we do the rodeo. So Mac, he's a promoter. So he comes in there, and Mac, he opens up his book, and he's got all these pictures of the Edna rodeo and all these guys that Dr. Evans knows. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make a deal with you. He said, I'll do y'all's rodeo for X amount of dollars, and anything over that, we'll split for the club. Because we didn't have any money. We were broke. And we said, all right, good deal. So we signed the contract, do the deal. Well, then Mac, they come in, they take over the town. They got bad company stickers everywhere. We go to the Dixie Chicken, take the party animal in there, and we'd lead him through the chicken, and everybody's riding him and petting him, and we have a rodeo pep rally at the chicken, and they make a big deal about it. The biggest rodeo in the history of Texas A&M.
Oh, I imagine.
At that time.
Yeah.
And, and so that was my last college rodeo because, they expect you to go to school at A&M. And so when I was in junior college and stuff, I kind of got by. They said, well, if you go to class, you can make a C. And I'm like, heck, I can do that. So I went to class, but, I guess there was a little more to it than just going to class. They said, you miss 5 points every time you miss class, And so anyway, so I heard somewhere, if you go to class every day, you can at least get a C. Well, I went to class and I didn't do that well. And so I didn't get to go to the college finals. I had enough points, but I didn't get to go to the college finals. But I got to do my hometown rodeo, and so I ended up I draw a mile high in the short round. I get on that rose garden of Max in the long round and win the long round, and get on mile high in the short round and won the short round and won the all around my last college rodeo, and it was at A&M, and so it was good times. But all of that stems from growing up, where I did around Charlie's and Koke and Wendell Culp and all those guys, that were the guys that we all looked up to,
Yeah.
And
I want to have Charlie on.
Do what?
I want to put Charlie on the podcast.
He'd be good. Charlie, he's got tons of stories.
Because he remembers everything.
Oh, yeah, he's something.
At my dad's funeral, he came over to my grandmother's house, and we flipping through all them old pictures. That, and you'd probably remember some of them too, but flip through them pictures of my dad's, and he's like, oh yeah, that's this bull, and he did this, and this was his brand, and
oh yeah,
he just remembers all of them. And but yeah, that was an era. Turns out that winter series apparently was pretty much everybody stopped in.
Oh
that
man,
winter series.
Huge. It was huge, and when I was going to school, one time, Charlie, I was young, man, and Charlie, he's just not afraid to do anything. And I'd been rodeoing off to college and everything. Well, I may have been my first year of college. I come home and he didn't have anybody to judge the bull ride in the winter series, and he called me, you can judge the bull ride. I'm like, man, Charlie, I will, but I mean, I don't want to mess up because heck, I never had judged the bull riding. So anyway. Luckily, Kenneth McKee, K-Mac, he was judging the other side. So So, man, I mean, I judged one side and came back judged the other. And I'm surprised I didn't get whipped. I mean, it was crazy. Those guys, they didn't take that stuff lightly. One time, there's one guy. The reason I bring that up is because one time a guy, he rides this bull, and I mean, he's sticking it on him. I mean, he's giving it to him, and I've got my stopwatch going, and then I clicked it, I guess, and I never. And then when I looked back at my watch, it was like 7 seconds or something. And when he comes off, and K-Mac scores him, and I don't, and I'm thinking, man, something just didn't feel right. So I go over to K-Mac. I said, man, I had him on my clock at 7. He goes, no, he got him rode. I said, good, because I said, I know I'm supposed to be judging my side, but I said, I don't want to screw up. I don't want to get whipped, you know. Because anyway, so yeah, and I judged the winter bull riding one time. That's the last time I did that. Thank goodness. I was like, no, thank you.
It can't be worse than judging a ranch bronc riding, though.
Oh man,
That was the worst for me. Like, I don't know, them WRCA deals probably better now because them guys, it's a little more organized. But just like an open ranch bronc riding to me is just the worst because everybody thinks that they should be 90.
Oh, yeah.
Especially like if that horse does turn back and rear up. You know, at a pro rodeo, they'd be 54. But at a ranch rodeo, that guy riding thinks that he just rode a freaking alligator, you know.
Right.
And
some of those saddle bronc riders were tough back in the day. Like there was a guy there at Lubbock named Judge Sims. He was, of course, you know, Scotty, your uncle, he was a little bandy rooster. Like he'd jump on anything. He didn't matter to him. He didn't care. He loved it, you know. And there was another little guy over there. He was an older guy. His name was Judge Sims, and Judge was a bronc riding son of a gun. And he was always super nice to me. But I was scared to death of him because I was young. And I heard all these stories about how he just, if you just said the wrong thing, he's going to whip you. He's a little old short, stout guy, you know, like Scotty was. And so anyway, I'm picking up broncs at Charlie's one night. And I don't know what, I mean, this is years and years ago. I'm young, you know, and I'm picking up broncs and Judd's in the bronc riding. I mean, he didn't really enter much anymore, but for some reason he just got a wild hair and decided he's going to enter. So Judd enters bronc riding. I'm picking up. He comes out to ride his bronc, and I've got to pick him up. I'm like, I ain't gonna miss this guy. I'm gonna make sure I can. Yeah. So he's running down the rail over there. He jumps off, gets off on me, and I go to pull the horse. Well, he just jumps over the rail, just crawls up in the stands, and just crawls up in the middle of some guy, leggings on, everything. I'm like, this is the sort of stuff I hear about on TV, but it's really him. But Judd was such a good guy, and he was a great bronc rider. But you didn't want to cross him, man. He was. Yeah.
He got in a fight.
Yeah. He just, I pick him up off the bronc. He just jumps on the fence, jumps over the rail. Somebody said something. He just crawled up there in the middle of them.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. This is back in the day, like back. I mean, I was young, but man, there was a lot of that deal that Charlie had on Saturday night.
Did you ever see any of my dad or uncles getting in a fight?
No, I didn't. But you know, a lot of people by the time I was around those guys, they were a little older. And they had kind of a reputation. They didn't, you know, they were good guys. Like they wouldn't go, Koke and Scotty, Scotty might, if he get teed off, you know, he'd kind of have, he just liked it. He just enjoyed just being in the middle of stuff. But, you know, they weren't bullies, you know, they weren't bullies. They weren't but they, you know, they boxed and people knew they did. And, you know, the first time I remember your dad, he had a little speed bag in the corner of his garage at your grandparents, you know, and he'd hit that speed bag, and I was like, man, I'm gonna have to have me one of them one of these days, and I learned how to do that. So I got a little deal in my corner of my hay barn. I got my speed bag in there. It's because of Koke, but you know they didn't mess with them much. But you know there's a lot of those stories about guys that are tough. You know, and I've heard you talk about it all the time. You know, about guys that are tough cowboys. But yeah, I hear y'all bragging about cowboys the toughest you know. But a good liar don't stand a chance because I knew one tough to the bone. He come from somewhere in Kansas. In truth, he was hard to dislike because he weren't really mean. He's just hard-headed. We call him P. Willick or Mike. Because when the weather get long below freezing, well, he never covered his ears. Each one looked sort of like a knot hole. The pieces broke off through the years. And a she-bear invaded his camp once, insisted on sharing his plate. He saved the last of his biscuits. For now, he can just count to 9. He used to have both of his elbows and a forehead without so much slope. Till a cow jerked him out of his saddle. He wouldn't let go of his rope. And he's faster than most men in fences. It's almost beyond belief he keeps both hands free for pounding. Men in fences, he keeps both hands free for pounding by stretching the wire with his teeth. What's more, he don't use a hammer. Drives nails with the back of his hand. But this last thing I'm fixing to tell you boys will prove there's no tougher man. For while driving a cow to the home ranch, just drifting the cowboy's dreams, a rattlesnake up and surprised him. And his horse come apart at the scene. It did. He bucked him clean out of his saddle. So high, you know how high? Let's say how high. So high that his bad breath condensed. And old Mike come down the cussing and lighted straddle a dang barbed wire fence. It did. He cut him clean up to his buckle, right between his feet and his chin, but old Mike just let his stirrups out longer
and rode his old pony on in.
But
I love that one.
yeah. You know, I had some talking about all that boxing, fighting and stuff. I had the guy that worked for me, Chris Cruz. He was a world-class boxer. He won the World Ringside Boxing in Colorado. And I used to say back when I really was rolling and shoeing lots of horses all the time, I always had a lot of guys work for me. And I always used to say, if you weren't a convicted felon, you couldn't work for me. But
what was the guy's Brad Schrader?
Brad. Oh,
Brad.
That worked for me?
No, that would run around back in that day. Knew my dad.
Man,
I don't know if he knew you.
Shoot.
I'm sure he did.
I
Brad.
probably knew him.
Brad
Schrader.
Rode Bulls.
Man, I tell you what, the guys that I remember was Sulie Shanklin and
Oh yeah,
those crazy guys.
I knew Ryan.
Do what?
I know Ryan, his son.
So Sulie, he had a sister named Martha Alice, and they went. I hung around with all those old. I didn't hang around with them, but you know, the Cowboys. My dad had a trailer house behind our house, and so a lot of those college kids rented our house from us, rented that trailer, and they'd have parties, and I'd go back there when I was a little kid and hang out at the parties, and and shoot dice and all that stuff. I was 12, 13 years old. I'm back there shooting dice with all the Cowboys and having fun. And so I just remember all those Cowboys because they were, they were just wild.
What about Fultine? Lane
Fultine?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't really know him that well, but I was around them some too. I was around a lot of those guys. I really, really Koke, Scotty, I was around them the most. Some of those feedlot guys. Yeah. I was around some of the Guywalt vibe, Byron May. I was around more of those kind of guys when I was younger. And then, did you ever know my uncle Eddie Course? He lived over there at Miami. He was with
I don't
conservation over there. He was another guy that he roped and bulldogged and stuff, and he worked for my dad. He's actually married to my aunt right now. But talking about all those guys, I mean, I had one guy named Ty Ship. He used to work for him. We called him T-Bird, and he'd go. I was always kind of the customers I had, I didn't really want. I wanted to be dressed nice. I wanted to look sharp.
Right.
I mean, this is how I shoe horses every day. Long sleeve shirt. I don't wear a T-shirt. I mean, I've always been like that for some reason. And T-Bird, he was one of the guys that worked for me, and he always listened to rap music. Always wanted to listen to rap. So we're going down the road. We got all this rap on all the time. So I kind of learned a lot about rap music at the time, and it gave me a little culture. Well, Ty, at that time I was single and living by myself, and Ty, he would go into jiu-jitsu, and he was training all the time, and we'd get to the sixes, and we'd get down to the Marymount Motel. There's 84 stalls down there. It's all sand and dirt. Hey, let me show you this move I learned in jiu-jitsu last night. I'm like, all right. So he gets me, he rolls me up in a ball, and he got me all watered up. I got dirt in every crevice in my body. I'm like, Ty, T-Bird, man, we got to get to work, And he, now let me show you this other move. So I started going to jiu-jitsu with him there for a while, and I went for quite some time there. And I got hurt a couple times, and then it just kind of got to where I didn't get. Then life started happening. I didn't get to go. But then then Chris Cruz, he starts helping me, and he's a world class boxer, and he knows how to, he's good grappler and everything. And so I was always around a lot tougher guys than me, so I always had good help, and I wasn't ever worried. I knew that if something happened, they'd have my back,
Right.
And then when Ish started helping me, same deal. And then I had a kid, Jordan Rowland. He worked for me. He started working for me.
Jordy?
Do what?
Jordy?
Jordan. Jordan Rowland. He wouldn't know him. He's 17 at the time. He's in his 30s now. But anyway,
there's a kid in Nazareth
and then-
named Jordy.
no, this kid, he lives in Lubbock. And then, but anyway, I had this I'd been married, and I had this, and the lady I was married to, one of her friends had a son that was a world-class baseball player. Like this kid was, he threw a 98-mile-an-hour fastball in high school. And so when he graduated from high school, he got drafted to the Baltimore Orioles, had like $2 million deal or whatever, but he got in trouble and couldn't pass a drug test and all that stuff. And anyway, he kind of got his life kind of together, and he needed a job. He was like 29 years old. He thought he was a gangster. He thought he was pretty tough. And Chris was working for me at the time, and so was Ish. And we were at Sixes one day, and they're out there, and this kid, we went and picked him up. I went and picked him up from jail one day. Okay, go pick him up from jail. We're driving. I was married at the time. She was with me, and he gets in the car, and he's just cussing. Hey, Mom, I need to F my mother for this. I want cigarettes. And I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to listen to this. So we get to 7-Eleven. He said, I need an effing hot dog. I need an effing cigarette, and I'm going to go get me some of this and that. And I was like, okay, when he comes back, I'm going to either get whipped or he's going to get whipped, but we're not. I'm done with this talking like this and being just running his mouth. And so I'm thinking, okay, he's big. He's like 6'5", and big old stout, slender guy, baseball player. And anyway, he gets back in the car and he starts cussing. I said, hey. And I kind of cracked my door because I thought, man, if he crawls in the middle of me in this car, I'm dead. And so I said, hey, look. I said, man, I don't know where you came from, how you grew up, but we're not going to talk like that. I said, I don't mind you cussing and stuff. I'm no saint, but I said, man, I'm done with it. I said, you mother after this and that and the other. I said, you're not going to talk like that in front of me or her or anybody else when you're around me. And he just stopped for me and he goes, man, I apologize. He said, I thought he was going to get mad or something. He goes, that's just the way I always talk. And I said, well, we're not going to talk like that today. So we go home, we get him, and they're like, man, you can't leave him here by himself. And I'm like, and then they said, well, he needs a job. And I'm like, God, great, this is all I need. And so I said, all right, you're going to help me in the morning. He goes, I said, make sure you have good clothes on, nice clothes, and be dressed appropriately. Don't be wearing saggy breeches or don't be wearing sweats because it's not going to be a good day for that. He shows up, he's dressed nice. He gets in, he's happy, he's ready to go. He said, man, what we do? I said, we're going to start shoeing horses. Today's your first day. And he goes, all right, man. And this guy never been around a horse in his life. And I mean, he just takes to it like ducks go to water. Really good. Everybody loved him. Just awesome dude, fun. Anyway, he thought he was pretty tough. Well, we get to Sixes one day and he gets to wrestling with Chris. And Chris, he's, probably at the time, he probably weighed, I don't know, 185, 210, something. He's stout, and he knew what he was doing. And old Chase, it's fighting with him, wrestling with him, and Chris just puts him on the ground, puts him in a crucifix like right now, and he's got him stuck. And he's mad. Get me up. Oh, you let me up. I'm gonna whoop you and all that stuff. And Chris is like, man, just sit here. You said you're gonna, when you get through getting mad, I'll let you up. So he lets him up and he goes, all right, you just get me where you want me. Chris goes, just get me however you want me. And you can, and then we'll go from there. And he grabs a hold of Chris. Chris throws him down, puts him in a crucifix again. He's mad. Anyway, he gets up and he figured out pretty quick. He wasn't quite so tough, but I've had a lot of guys that have worked for me that were pretty tough. Baker had a guy work for him one time. Jimmy Newman. He just showed up one day and he told Baker, said, I want to learn how to shoe horses. And Baker said, all right. He jumps him in there. And Jimmy, he lives over here around Abilene, Hawley now. And hadn't really shot a lot of horses. And Jimmy, we go to the Sixes very early in the morning. First thing, we get there 7:30, 8 o'clock. First rattle out of the hat, a mare stomps on his toe and just obliterates his big toe. And he takes his sock off. It's all bloody. And I'm like, golly, man. And I'm like, why don't we wrap it up and let's do that? And he just.
I hope you're enjoying a ranch fuel as you're listening to this episode of Rodeo Time. Use code DALE on ranchfuel.com for 15% off, old son. Drink up and use code DALE on ranchfuel.com.
He just reached down there and just yanked his toenail off, threw it in the trash, put his sock and his boot back on. And I said, man, why don't you sit over there and take a break? He goes, I got a break when I got the job. I said, all right, let's go. And he worked all day. So I've had some pretty cool people work for me that were pretty, they were pretty bronky.
I love that.
Yeah.
You gave me a break when I got the job. Dang. Yeah, that's yeah. I guess having a helper really kind of just saves you from getting under them that many more times, huh?
Well, it just takes a little pressure off of you. You know, you can either, I've always said that you can shoe them or finish them. Like if you just have a few to do, you have 4 or 5 to do, you can shoe them, finish them by yourself, no problem. But if you get big days, you know, if you're doing all the shoeing, the trimming, and the nailing, you can get along pretty good. Or if you're just finishing, you can get along pretty good. But if you have to do both, that's where it kind of starts taxing your body a little bit. So I've always, for a long time, I've had a finish man. I had a secretary that scheduled all of my stuff.
What's all the finishing?
Just clinching the nails and like once you get all the shoes nailed on and the nails are sticking out, then the finish man comes and he crimps all the nails.
Crimping,
yeah,
crimping.
And it's crimping now. I mean, that's you changed the farrier world on the crimping. I mean, it used to be clinching. Now it's crimping. And so when I teach my new finish people, I tell them this is not a prying tool. This is a crimping tool. So anyway, but yeah, so the finish guy that your helper, your apprentice or whatever, they take a lot of load off of you doing that. And it really helps and it keeps the ball rolling because we'll do quite a few in a day. And in order to do that and do a good job, then you need somebody like that can kind of take that part of it for you, you know. So
how many do you I guess it just depends on if you got a helper, but I mean, how many do you kind of walk around these days, like in a day?
Now, probably year round, you know, just in a physical year, if you will, year round, I probably average about 12 a day.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, and used to, when I used to have like those 2 helpers in really the prime of that, when I lived in Lubbock, we'd do 25 a day, every day, 5 days a week. And then we'd rope after that. And it was crazy, and I had a secretary, for a lot of years and she was actually the mask rider too. And, she had a couple of horses and I shoe her horses and I gave her a phone. It was like an office phone so she could answer anywhere she was. And she did all of my scheduling. So I didn't have to deal with all that. And so we'd do 18, 25 a day. And she'd schedule them all, send me text my schedule to me, and we'd be off and rolling. And at that time, we'd go to 3 places during the week. We'd go to the vet clinic, we'd go to the Sixes, and we'd go to the racetrack in Lubbock. And they had a training track there where they had a bunch of the high-end quarter horses, you know, that went to Rio Dosa, to the All-American, or to the Alamedas, Los Alamitos in California, and to the Champions, or to the big races they have in Texas. And we'd do all those 2-year-olds, and we'd go there one day a week. And we'd probably do anywhere from 18 to 20 there every week. And then I just took a crew, and I had 3 or 4 guys that I paid them $50 a day just to catch horses and hold them. That's all they did. And we just had an assembly line. And man,
how far along do you like a horse to be when you agree to shoe one? Like as far as just like their temperament and willingness to give up a foot?
You know, that's a good question because you can ask 50 people and get 7,500 different opinions. You know, everybody's got a different idea on that. For me, you know, it's nice if you can do them. I mean, it's good to start a colt when they're young because you can kind of get their feet going the right direction. Mm-hmm. The thing about, you know, as far as one being good to do, like I say, you know, I grew up around horsemen. I claim to be a horseman myself. So there's a lot of horse psychology that goes into shoeing a horse. You know, especially if you got one there's a lot of horses you have horses that are scared, you have horses that are spoiled, and you have horses that are kind of worried and just don't know. And a scared horse, you'll get yourself hurt on a scared horse not knowing what to do. A spoiled horse will really hurt you because they don't have any respect for you. And so knowing the difference in those horses and how to handle each one of them has a big impact on how you do them. And you know, we've been real fortunate to, and a lot of horseshoers, they'll be like, if he's bad, I'm just not doing him. I'm not going to do this. And unfortunately, the world just doesn't work that way, and you don't have to do them. However, I can tell pretty quick if one needs a shot or needs some sedation and I've been very fortunate now because I've got a good rapport with the veterinarians, and if I need something, they're willing to help me. And they're willing to help anybody really, but I've got good relationships. And another thing is I just feel like that I've evolved as a horse person enough in my career and in my life. And I have horses of my own, and I've started them from scratch. And so one of the easiest things to do really is teach a horse to pick up their feet. And I do get a little frustrated at some of the cowboys. I'll probably get a shapping, but I get a little frustrated with some of the cowboys because they don't even think about picking their feet up. And I'm not too sure some of them know how to do it, to teach them. And it's really easy to teach a horse to pick up their feet, but you got to, it's kind of like Ray Hunt or Craig or Chris Cox or any of those guys, that there's a little method and step-by-step method that you can use to help them, teach them, show them. And before you know it, they'll pick you up and they'll trust you and they'll pick their feet up. But it's, I don't know. I think just knowing horses and how to get around them and knowing their personalities, knowing psychology of a horse. And if you get one that's bad, some horses, I'll pick up a front foot and just clean it out if they're going to be kind of watchy or worried. And then I'll go to the back foot and clean it. I won't just get hung up trying to stay there and force him to stay there forever.
Right.
I'll just do a little bit at a time. And before you know it, I just keep going around him, and then you have him done. And he really hasn't known he's kind of gotten accustomed to it, knows you're going to put his foot down at a certain point, knows you're not going to try to yank his leg off and eat him for supper, and so I don't know. I think there's a lot of horsemanship involved in shoeing horses. And my brothers and I think we've been fortunate that we've been around a lot of really good people that we've learned a lot of good horsemanship skills from that have allowed us to do our job on horses that weren't quite as user friendly. And our dad was really good at it. And Baker, my younger brother, he's really good at working on one that's a little fractious. And so, I think being a cowboy and being around cowboys and horsemen and horse people that are really handy, I think that's really been a big influence and a big asset to us as horseshoers to be able to do the job on one that's not quite as user friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
dang.
But I mean, you if you're gonna survive in this business and you're gonna make a living, you're gonna have to go. You're gonna have to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
You can't enter the bull ride and get a jump kicker every time, or one that's a jump kick spinner. You're gonna get on a rank one sometimes. You're gonna have to bow up and get it done and find a way. And shoeing horses the same way. You just gotta find a way. Like when I first started shoeing horses, man, I was hungry. Everybody thought because my dad was Blane Chapman, and they just, in my mind, I felt like that they just, they thought we had it made and everything, but we didn't. We had to get out there and grind it out just like anybody else, and nothing's free, man. You gotta, if you're gonna really be good at something, and you're really gonna excel at something, you got to put the time and effort into it. And horseshoeing's the same way, roping's the same way, training horses the same way. You gotta get in there and get after it.
What's your suggestion to a guy getting started? Like, should he go to one of these schools, or should he jump in and help somebody like you pull shoes, or
there's
both?
There's some good horseshoeing schools out there, and we get some kids that have gone to some schools, and then you get them out of school, and then they actually really learn what to do once they get out of school. It's kind of like going to college or anything else. You don't really learn a whole lot in college, but you learn a lot when you get out there and get after it. And I think it's better. I'm not saying don't go to a horseshoeing school. If you want to go to a horseshoeing school and it fits your lifestyle and your time frame, then go for it. There's some good ones out there. I feel like that getting with somebody that's established in the business, that's got a good reputation, that has the ability to train you, I think that's probably going to be your best bet. We start them out pulling and finishing. Some of them show up, they don't even know how to put the halter on right. And so we start them out pulling and finishing. how to get under a horse, how to get around a horse, how to pick their feet up, what a horse's actions are. How why is he jumping around because you're not getting under him correctly. So we try to teach, safety and try to just get them started that way. And I think that if you're going to go to a horseshoe and if you're going to want to learn how to shoe horses, I think your best bet is to just take the time and go to somebody that shoes a lot of horses, that's willing to put up with you and help you and kind of get you going in the right direction. Just start you from the ground up. And I do that a lot. I've got a young guy working for me right now, and everybody's different. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and you have to build on their weaknesses and let their strengths kind of fall into place. And that's the way that it works for me. And so, yeah, I think you get with somebody that's established, that willing to help you, and that can keep you busy and give you a good foundation. So when you get in off, go by yourself, that you can actually handle the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's just one of those things that it'll always pay you back somehow, and whether you decide, like my dad, for instance, you at least just do your own from then on. It's almost, I think a trade like that is the best plan B. Guys say people mainstream has made college like this fallback for people that don't know what they want to do, or if they know they want to do this thing, but well, what are you going to do if that doesn't work out? Well, if you got this degree, in my opinion, especially for, cowboys, it's like, no, a good fallback is a trade, whether it's training horses or, shoeing horses or building fence or something like that. I think that's where a guy can maybe really have that supplemental income. But I mean, if you're going to make it as a day worker, if that's the romantic side of cowboying that you want to pursue, like, you just have to have a side hustle.
No, I agree. And and going to, like me, I didn't realize that you did, and I'm for getting a college education. I mean, I was kind of brainwashed to the fact that you had to get a college education. You weren't going to be successful. It's just that was the time and era that we lived in. And so I went to college. I didn't know that I had another option, but
yeah,
I also had something that I could do for a living that I could do to make money while I was in college, that allowed me the time and the flexibility to actually make money while I was going to school, and I didn't have to work at a hourly job. And so I wanted to be a horse trainer. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to train horses. I love that. I didn't realize at the time that you could make a living doing that, like Ray Hunter, Craig Cameron, or Chris Cox or something. But that was really my first love, and I just liked it all. I loved shoeing horses too. I still do. It's been great to me, and I'll do it until I can. I really enjoy it that much, and there's a lot of satisfaction out of it. And talking about day work guys, I mean, there's a lot of those guys that can get some shoes nailed on, and they can make a little extra money doing that, or getting a young horse and getting him going and riding an outside horse for somebody, and then paying him he can make money day working and make money training a young horse, or riding a young horse, putting some miles on him. And so, yeah, I think that if you're cowboying, and even if you don't want to shoe horses for a living, it's something that I think is good to know how to do, because you're always going to jerk a shoe off or something like that, and you need to know how to put it on and do it properly. And
we're about to go. So here in a minute, we're going to go. I'm going to get you to give me a proper lesson. I that's one of the things I guess I took for granted. I've held a lot of horses for my dad, but the two things I think that I just really figured I'd let him have, that I didn't want to go to TC Ranch Management, because I felt like I could just ask him. There were times where he would just talk about things in ranch, and I would just take notes. I remember being like, I never really was the son that thought his dad didn't know anything. It was really the opposite for me. Like, I would take notes sometimes when he would talk. And so with that mindset, I guess when the time came to decide whether or not I needed to go to TCU Ranch Management, that 9-month, 2-semester program they got, I was just like, well, no, I mean, I got my dad, and he's encyclopedia for me. I would just lean on his knowledge. And the same thing applied to shoeing horses. I held a lot for him, and that's where I did learn that there's some people out there that might job a horse in the ribs with the rasps every now and then, but but then losing him, it's just like, oh dang, I don't know what to do with cows. I don't know what to do with shoeing horses, but I got to go to Arizona this spring, and the way it's looking, maybe get to go again in the fall. And
that's cool. That was cool.
You can't go 20 feet without a shoe. And I was like, oh dang, like, if I'm at Dixon Creek, we'll handle it later. Probably when I get home, I'll just put, get somebody to walk around and for. I don't need to. But out there, like if you're out in the middle of it, like you might make it back to camp, but you ain't riding that horse again if you don't put a shoe back on. So that's whenever I was like, man, maybe if I could just at least tack one on, know which way to roll the nails and shape a shoe a little bit.
Yeah, and that's like us growing up, a lot of people like, man, did your dad teach you how to shoe horses? And I was just around it so much, and there was a lot of people that came and hung out with us a lot when I was younger and that were really, really handy. And I learned a lot from a lot of different people, really. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff from my dad about anatomy and just about the function of a horse's foot and legs. But he always positioned us around really, really intelligent guys and really, really top end horseshoers. And so I probably learned, honestly, I probably learned more from a lot of those guys than I actually did from him, because they were always, whenever in the 80s, whenever he really got to traveling a lot, he was in and out a lot because he was going all over the world working on mounted horses. It was crazy. And
other countries, right?
Everywhere. It was so he
RodeoTime.com is the only website that should exist because it's the greatest apparel line that has ever existed. So go there now to get a t-shirt, a hoodie, a cap, a vest, whatever it is you need. Go to RodeoTime.com, old son.
Whenever he came up with the Heart Bar shoe, the American Farriers Association, it started in the late 70s, like say 79 or something like that, and they used to have an ad in the back of the Western Horseman. Well, my mother read that ad and she's like, we're gonna go to the convention. That's, yeah, we'll go. And then they wouldn't go. And like 1979, 80, right in there, my mother said, I'm going. If you want to go, fine. If you don't, fine. I'm going. And by this time, he'd already been working on laminated horses, founded horses, and trying to develop a protocol that could help him. And he had developed this Heart Bar shoe that he had read about, come out of a book that was written in the 1800s. It was a shoe with a frog plate on it to help protect horses, the bottom of their feet against the cobblestones on pulling horses. And so he knew enough about the anatomy. He studied it enough with some different veterinarians, and he learned that he could utilize the frog as an arch support to support and stabilize the bone on these horses that were having trouble. And he took a bunch of pictures and he had a bunch of schematics that he had drawn, and he ends up going to the convention with my mother and starts talking to all these guys, and they're like, man, there's no way that'll work. And he's like, well, this is what we've been doing. That's what he shows them the pictures. And so they asked him to speak. And so it was in like 83 or 84. He was the first guy to ever shoe a horse on the fourth floor of the Hyatt Regency Hotel or the Sheraton Hotel in Houston, Texas, and put a Heart Bar shoe and did a resection, cut the front of the foot off, and showed him how all of that worked. And like if you mash your fingernail and it gets full of blood, you drill a hole in it, and pressure goes away. Horse's foot will do the same thing, and you get a lot of relief. And so anyway, from that, it went crazy. It was before the internet, and like we talked about a lot of times, and man, people started calling, and the phone ringing off the wall every day. And so he's been asked to go here and there. And so the next thing you know, there's people coming and staying to learn how to apply this shoe and how to work on it and what all goes into the application of it. And so I was always around a lot of really top-notch, high-end guys, and I learned a lot of stuff from those guys. And a guy named Gun, so it was just, so I've learned just over the years, and there's still a lot of guys like that today that
what would my dad had one horse. He was always like, he would take a protein tub lid and cut out, and it would go that little hard plastic between the hoof and the shoe.
Mm-hmm.
What was he probably doing there?
Probably just protecting the sole of their foot. Sometimes we get a little bit. Sometimes horses, the sole of their foot's can be a little bit shallow, and they can be a little bit tender-footed, and you can put a pad of some sort between the shoe and the foot, and that protects that.
I kind of forgot about that. It was a horse named Rodeo, and anyways, when he died, I sent his two good horses, Rodeo and Ziggy, to Clint Hale over that picks up for Stace. And he got to where he couldn't use Rodeo anymore because he would get crippled. But I'm just remembering now that I forgot to tell him that's how my dad would shoe him. He might have got a couple more years out of him. Sorry, Clint.
There's a lot of pathology that can go on inside of a horse's foot, and there's only so many things you can do to a horse's foot. So and when you're doing those horses that have problems, leverage, tension, pressure, protection, support. There's not a whole lot of things you can do. So when you're looking at a package for a horse that's got foot problems, then you need to figure out what he needs. Does he need protection? Does he need added pressure or support, or does he need to reduce leverage? Any of those things. So you look at those and you say, okay, how can I package this horse in a way that he needs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those, and then he can still go do his job and perform at a high level. And so there's all kinds of shoes and all kinds of different ways and products on the market today that you can put into play from a therapeutic and orthotic standpoint to really help these horses get along and be able to have a real good, useful life and add a lot of useful life to them. So,
well, I guess let's go. I think I'm gonna maybe Buckethead. He needs all 4 of them, and maybe we'll start with him. And I want to get you to look at. Heck, you might have seen him. He's been around so much, but a gray horse I have. They call him Del Brisby, but anyway, he's had bad feet. I just want to get some advice on him. But other than that, what's some life advice you have?
Man, I think about that a lot. I could talk all day on life advice. I love that. I like the positive mindset type of stuff, and I say find something that you love to do. Like everybody says the same thing. I've heard this a lot on here. Find something you love to do and get good at it and figure out how to make some money doing it. And everybody says, well, if you find that, then you'll never have to work a day in your life. Which I don't agree with that. I think if you find something you love to do and you're passionate about, I think you're going to have to work your tail off. Mm-hmm. However, you may not actually have what we call a job. And I think that's the difference in what I think. And believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will.
Yes, sir.
If you got this much of you that believes and this much of you that doesn't, this much will win every time. And just believe in yourself, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are what make you get better and learn from them and move on. And like that, one of my favorite bumper stickers I've got on my shoeing trailer. I got it from Craig Turnka. You met those guys skiing. They're some of the best in the world right there. They really are handy. I mean, he's something. And he's got this bumper sticker, and it says, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from poor judgment.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's one of my favorite sayings. And just, man, do what you believe in. And we all have something. We all have a niche, and especially horseshoeing. Horseshoeing is such a niche business. I mean, you can be a horse trimmer. You can just shoe reiners. You can shoe hunter jumpers. You can shoe cutting horses. You can just trim old ladies' ponies. There's so many different directions you can go, whether it's rodeo and day working, anything we do in life. You can find your spot.
Yeah,
and find your spot and go with it and be good at it, and you'll find a way to make a living at it. And put yourself around people. Everything we do is about people. Mm-hmm. You put yourself around the right kind of people, the people that you want to emulate, the people that you like what they do. Mm-hmm. And don't be afraid to ask people. Don't be afraid to somebody that you think is untouchable is probably a lot more accessible than you think. And so, And if they're not, then they're not the person for you. So, don't be afraid to, if you see somebody that you really want to talk to, or that you really want to reach out to, heck, reach out to them. The worst thing they can say is no, and they can't take away your birthday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh man, that's good. I'll just echo the thing you said. I really liked it. Knowledge like a pile of horse manure. If it stays in one spot, underneath it, it's going to die. Everything under it dies. If you spread it out, everything grows. I love that.
Yeah, and my dad was like that because, this guy that wanted to help him, that he went and asked for advice. He said, you just keep doing it, son. You'll figure it out. And he just realized right then, he goes, man, we don't learn this. None of us learn this stuff by ourselves. We all have people that have guided us and directed us in the right way. And I know I have, and I still do. My brother Baker, I really wanted him to come the last time because he was with me whenever I was going to come the last time. And man, he's a really good storyteller, and he's got a lot of good stuff. And he works with me one day a week. He goes with me to the sixes, and he's really sharp and real good philosopher, real kind of guy, and he's got a lot of good advice, and he's a real brilliant thinker, and I really I get a lot from him. He's somebody that I've got a lot from. He probably doesn't even realize it,
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate the gift here. It's the world of horseshoeing, and no matter what the world is, Dale Brisby's on top of
That's
it.
right.
That's what I
right.
get from this.
He's the
this
man.
little gift. Cool. Well, we're on to the next one. Everybody, if you need a horse shod, call Blane. We'll put his number down below in the description.
Yeah.
And all right. And look out for this video.
That's what we do, man. That's what we do. Man.
Yeah, look out for this video. We're about to you can learn how to shoot one from this video that's about to come out.
Maybe learn what not to do.
Yeah, maybe that too.
Thank you.